Lock the wire? The entire 120 million. I want it frozen before this plane leaves the gate. Ma'am, end that call right now. You are disturbing this cabin, and this is not how a passenger behaves in first class. Ma'am, the seat is being reassigned. Stand up, collect your belongings, and step into the aisle. She heard the third sentence the way a person hears the first drops of rain on a metal roof. Not surprising. Not unfamiliar. The same weather, arriving under a different sky. The flight attendant was standing too close. Close enough that the perfume on the woman's uniform mixed with the recirculated cabin air. The brass nameplate above her pocket read C. Bennett. 16 years with Meridian Atlantic. 4 of them in premium cabin. Every one of them spent learning the precise language that airlines use when they want a passenger to feel small without leaving anything behind that the passenger could later prove. Imani Sinclair did not look up from her tablet right away. She had been 46 that morning. She had been a billionaire on paper for 9 of those years. And she had been, for all of them, a black woman moving through a world that still kept its small surprised face whenever those 3 facts met inside one body. She had learned, over time, that the people who needed to shrink strangers grew anxious if the stranger refused to react in the moment they expected. Silence was its own mirror. Most of them could not bear seeing their own face in it for long. She finished the sentence she was reading. She closed the tablet. She lifted her eyes. I am sorry. Could you repeat that? Her voice was so low that the woman in 2B leaned forward to listen. Claire Bennett blinked twice. The script she had rehearsed in the galley did not account for this. The script had assumed anger, or fear, or the eager defensiveness of a passenger who had been caught in a mistake. The script had not assumed a question delivered the way a quiet door closes. The seat is being reassigned, ma'am. By whom? That single question was a small grenade dropped at her feet. Claire's smile thinned. I will not debate airline operations with you in this aisle, ma'am. I am not debating. I am asking by whom. Behind Claire, near the curtain that separated the first-class galley from the rest of the cabin, a tall man in a charcoal suit shifted his weight. Silver hair. Heavy watch. The careful neutrality of a man who had spent 3 decades pretending he was never the source of the decisions he made. Vincent Caldwell, Senior Vice President of Operations for Meridian Atlantic Airlines. Imani had studied his face on page 11 of the investment binder her team had prepared 3 weeks earlier. He had been smiling in the photograph, beside the chief executive, standing in front of an old propeller plane, the kind of staged image airlines used when they wanted to imply history without using the word legacy. Vincent did not look at her. That, by itself, was an answer. Claire stepped half an inch closer, and her voice tightened. Ma'am, we have another passenger who requires this seat. I am asking you to cooperate. Imani lifted her boarding pass between 2 fingers. She did not raise it. She did not wave it. She simply held it where any honest pair of eyes could read it. Seat 2A. First class. Confirmed. Paid. Booked 20 days earlier through the office of an executive assistant who had been booking her flights for 11 years. Claire's eyes moved over the pass. Briefly. The way a person glances at a receipt they have already decided to dispute. I understand what it says. The way she said it removed the word ma'am from her sentence, and somehow the omission spoke louder than the word would have. A man stepped out from the galley then. Light gray suit. The faint red flush of a person who had drunk coffee too fast on an empty stomach. Robert Hayes. Frequent flyer, premium tier, 3 meetings a week in Atlanta and Chicago. He always took the route Imani was now sitting on. He always sat in seat 2A. He had never, in 15 years of doing so, been told no. Claire. We need to be in the air by 1:15. I have a board sitting at 4. Claire gave him a small, apologetic nod. The kind of nod a person gives a regular customer at a coffee shop that knows what they want before they order. We are handling it, Mr. Hayes. That was the moment Imani understood. This was not a mistake. This was a choice. A choice that had been made in the galley, the way these choices had always been made. Quietly. Politely. In the language of operational accommodation. Old enough to have lived inside many uniforms across many decades. Her phone vibrated on the tray table. The screen lit a soft blue. First tranche released. 25 million USD. Apex Crown Capital to Meridian Atlantic Airlines. For a single breath, the cabin around her seemed to dim, and the only living thing in the world was the cool glow of that small notification. Meridian Atlantic had just accepted the first piece of the rescue package that, by the end of the quarter, would total $120 million. The airline was hemorrhaging cash. The board had spent 6 weeks chasing her. Her firm was the only investor at the table large enough, and patient enough, to write a check of that size without waiting for the company to fall further first. Her signature. Her firm. Her money. The same airline that was now asking her, in the gentle voice of a corporation, to walk into the back of the plane so Robert Hayes could feel important next to a window. Claire did not see the message. Robert did not see it. No one in the cabin understood that the woman in 2A, with her natural braids pulled neatly back and a single gold ring on her right hand, was not just another passenger. She was the woman the airline's chief executive had been begging to meet for 43 days. Imani set one finger on the corner of the phone. She did not tap. Not yet. She had not built Apex Crown Capital by reacting to first insults. She had built it by watching the whole table before she moved a single piece. "Ma'am, I am going to need your cooperation." Claire's voice carried farther this time. A few rows back, a phone lifted into the air. Then a second one. A soft electronic click. Another. The recording had begun. Imani heard it. Claire heard it. And still she pushed forward. "We can place you in economy. We can offer a generous travel credit. We can make this very easy, ma'am, if you simply work with us." Imani turned her face toward the window for a moment. Outside, a ground crew in yellow vests was loading bags into the belly of the aircraft. A fuel truck idled by the wing. The plane sat polished and bright on the wet tarmac, full of strangers who would soon be told, in the careful language of airlines, that nothing unusual had happened on board this morning. She thought of her mother. Loretta Sinclair, 68 years old, still living in the same narrow brick house on the east side of Detroit, where the radiator clanked in winter and the porch light buzzed in summer. Loretta had cleaned other women's houses for 32 years. She had also raised a daughter who had announced, at the age of 14, that she was going to own a building one day. Loretta had not laughed at her. Loretta had taken a long breath, lowered the iron she had been holding, and said, "Then you'll have to learn how to walk into a room without asking the room for permission." Imani breathed in. Held it. Let it go. She had built Apex Crown Capital out of a converted broom closet in a shared workspace in Midtown. She had sat across from bankers who smiled politely while denying her line of credit. She had pitched investors who praised her vision out loud and wrote checks to white men with worse decks. She had walked into rooms where she had to introduce herself twice before anyone remembered she was the founder. And here she was now. First class. Seat 2A. Still being asked, very politely, to prove she belonged. She looked Claire in the eye. "I am not going to move." The cabin froze. Claire's professional smile vanished all at once, the way a curtain falls. Robert exhaled through his nose. "Oh, for God's sake!" Imani's voice did not rise. It did the opposite. It dropped, in temperature and in pitch, until every word landed clean and edged. "This is my seat. I paid for it. I have a confirmed boarding pass in my hand. If you intend to remove me, you will state, clearly, and on the record, the reason." Claire swallowed. For the first time, something uncertain moved across her face. Her eyes flicked toward the galley curtain. Imani's eyes followed. Vincent Caldwell still stood in the same place. The neutrality was still on his face. But his right hand, which had been resting on the curtain rod, had tightened. The knuckles were lighter than the rest of his skin. He gave Claire the smallest possible nod. That nod told Imani everything. This was no longer about a seat. It was bigger than Claire. Bigger than Robert and his wounded sense of routine. Bigger than the morning's flight schedule. This was the oldest reflex of an institution. Power, protecting itself. Power, deciding who got to stay in a room it considered its own. Claire turned back toward her. Her voice tightened to a thin wire. Then I will have to call security. Imani's index finger moved across her phone screen. A single small motion. Not theatrical. Not fast. The kind of motion a woman makes when she is signing something she has been preparing to sign for a very long time. Transaction frozen. All outgoing tranches suspended. Apex Crown Capital. She set the phone face down on the armrest. Do what you believe you have to do. And in the silence that followed, Imani Sinclair sat very still, while the airline around her began to make the most expensive mistake in its 63-year history. Claire held her gaze a second longer than necessary. Then she turned, sharply, and walked toward the galley. Her shoes clicked against the cabin floor in small, clipped beats. The sound was ordinary. But in the silence she had just created, it sounded like the second hand of a clock that nobody in that cabin would forget. Imani did not watch her go. She kept her eyes on the curtain where Vincent stood. Vincent had spent 32 years inside Meridian Atlantic. He knew every union rule, every internal weakness, every board member who owed him a quiet favor. He had survived few crises, 2 leadership changes, a near pilot strike, and a federal investigation that had ended in a settlement no employee was supposed to discuss. He had learned, slowly and skillfully, how to dress personal bias in the clothing of operational procedure. And now, for the first time that morning, something inside him had shifted. He was beginning to suspect, very late, that he had misread the situation. Not because he yet knew who Imani was. Because the woman in 2A had not behaved like a woman who could be quietly moved. Across the aisle, a woman in her early 70s set down her crossword. Margaret Ellis. Retired teacher from a small town outside Cleveland. 41 years in middle school classrooms, half of them spent learning to identify, with painful accuracy, the moment an adult started dressing up unfairness as procedure. She leaned toward her husband. She hasn't raised her voice once. Paul Ellis, 74, did not move his eyes from the magazine in his lap. I know. That's what's bothering me. A younger man in row 4 lifted his phone a little higher. His thumb was visibly trembling. He was an insurance adjuster from Charlotte. He was not, by nature, a brave person. He apologized to strangers when he held doors open. He had spent his adult life avoiding arguments in restaurants. But something about Imani's stillness had made it impossible for him to look away. Robert stepped impatiently into the aisle. Can we please move this along? Some of us have actual schedules. Imani turned her face toward him. Her voice did not change. Yes. Some of us do. Robert blinked. He had been expecting irritation. He had been expecting either tears or attitude. He had not been expecting a sentence that returned his own words to him with the corners filed off. Claire returned. Behind her came 2 men in dark jackets. The older one had a quiet gray earpiece tucked into his right ear. The younger one had broader shoulders and the careful posture of a man who was very new to wearing a uniform in public. The older one stopped beside her row. Ma'am. I am Officer Nolan Price. Airport Security. The crew has informed me you are refusing to comply with the seating reassignment. Imani extended her boarding pass. I am refusing to give up a seat I paid for. Officer Price took the pass. He read it. Then he looked at her. Then he looked at the pass again. His face shifted, just a fraction. He had been led to expect a particular kind of passenger. He had not been led to expect a woman in a perfectly tailored navy suit, holding a perfectly valid first-class ticket, speaking quieter than any of the people around her. Behind him, Claire spoke quickly. She has been difficult since boarding. We have a long-time customer who needs the accommodation, and she is delaying the aircraft. Imani turned her head slowly toward Claire. Difficult how? Claire opened her mouth. Nothing came out at first. The cabin waited. Imani's voice continued, quiet enough that everyone leaned in to catch it. Did I raise my voice? No. Did I threaten anyone? No. Did I touch anyone? No. Did I show a valid boarding pass when you asked? Officer Price still held the pass in his hand. He looked uncomfortable now. Claire's cheeks darkened. Vincent stepped into the aisle. That is enough. His voice carried the easy confidence of a man used to ending conversations. Officer Price turned to him. And you are? Vincent Caldwell. Senior Vice President of Operations for Meridian Atlantic. The title landed in the cabin like a stamp on an envelope. Claire straightened. Robert smiled faintly. Imani did neither. Vincent moved closer. He smoothed his lapel with one hand, the way a man smooths a tablecloth when he is about to say something he wants to sound generous. Ms. Sinclair? We do not want this morning to become unpleasant for anyone. Her name landed in her chest like a small stone striking still water. Ms. Sinclair? Of course he knew. He had known before Claire ever approached her row. He had known when he stood at the gate watching her board. He had simply decided, somewhere in the previous 15 minutes, that her name was less important than Robert Hayes's preference for a window seat. That told her everything she had still hoped not to know. This was not confusion. This was choice. Vincent lowered his voice. We are offering you a perfectly reasonable alternative. A comfortable economy seat. A travel voucher of generous value. Our sincere appreciation for your understanding. Imani gave a slow nod, the kind a woman gives during a sales pitch she has already decided to decline. And if I do not accept? Vincent's eyes hardened. The change was almost invisible. Almost. Then the crew may regrettably conclude that you are interfering with aircraft operations. That carries federal consequences. There it was. Threat. Polished smooth, wrapped in the soft cloth of regulation. Imani felt a thin, cold line of anger rise in her chest. Not the kind that burned. The kind that sharpened. She thought of her mother again. Loretta, standing at the customer service counter of a Detroit grocery chain in 1988, holding a damaged carton of milk and a receipt that the manager had refused to refund. Imani had been 10. She had watched her mother smile, politely, the entire time, and accept the answer, and walk out of the store with the broken milk still in the bag, and only in the car had she said, very quietly, "Some places teach you that being right is not enough." But age had taught Imani something further. Power did not protect a woman from disrespect. It only changed her options once disrespect arrived. She looked back at Officer Price. Officer, am I being removed because I am a safety threat? Officer Price hesitated. Claire looked at Vincent. Robert muttered, "This is absurd." Margaret Ellis finally spoke. "No. She is not." Every head in the front of the cabin turned toward her. Her voice was not loud. But it was clear, the way a teacher's voice is clear in a hallway full of noise. She has been polite this entire time. She has not raised her voice. She has not done anything except sit in the seat she paid for. Claire's eyes flashed. "Ma'am, please stay out of crew matters." Margaret sat a little taller. "I spent 41 years inside public schools. I know what unfair treatment sounds like, even when it is wearing a uniform." A ripple moved through the cabin. The young man in row 4 whispered into his phone. "Tell me you got that." Vincent's face tightened. Officer Price handed the boarding pass back to Imani. "Ma'am, the airline can request that you step off the aircraft, so this can be resolved at the gate." Imani took the pass back. "I understand." Claire exhaled too soon, and too visibly. Imani stood. Slowly. Deliberately. The cabin watched. She buttoned her suit jacket. She lifted her briefcase. She picked her tablet up from the empty seat beside her. Then she turned to face Vincent. I will step off this aircraft. Under protest. I want your full name. I want your title. I want the stated reason you removed me from a seat I paid for. And I want all of it documented, in writing, before this aircraft leaves the gate. Vincent's expression flickered. Just briefly. Robert laughed quietly under his breath. Good luck with that. Imani turned her eyes on him. Just once. Just long enough for Robert to stop smiling, because something had appeared in her face that had not been there a moment ago. Not anger. Not fear. Recognition. The kind a person wears when they finally stop hoping institutions will do the right thing on their own, and start preparing, very calmly, to make them answer for not doing it. She walked toward the front of the cabin, her head level, her steps neither rushed nor reluctant. Margaret Ellis caught her eye as she passed. The older woman did not smile. She simply nodded. Imani returned the nod. Then she stepped onto the jet bridge, and the heavy door swung shut behind her with the small mechanical sound of a chapter ending. The jet bridge was colder than the cabin. It was always colder. That was the first time travelers learned about the tunnels that connected the world to the sky. They were not built for people to linger in. They were built for the brief passage between two warmer places. Imani walked between the two officers, briefcase in her left hand, boarding pass in her right, her steps unhurried. She would not give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her stumble. She would not give them the smaller satisfaction of seeing her hurry. Behind her, the muffled voices from inside first class continued. Claire's tone, low and urgent. Vincent's lower still. Robert Hayes laughed once, short and pleased, the laugh of a man who had just settled a bill someone else had paid. Then came Margaret Ellis. Her voice carried cleanly through the closed aircraft door. This is shameful. No one inside answered her. But the words followed Imani down the jet bridge the way a hand rests briefly on a friend's shoulder. At the gate, passengers waiting for later flights turned to stare. Some of them had already seen the first short video, the one that was, even now, climbing through the algorithm like fire through dry grass. Others had not seen anything yet. They had simply watched a black woman in a navy suit being walked off an aircraft by two officers, and they had begun, the way people often do when authority is nearby, to fill in the gaps with whatever stories they had been taught. A small girl in a yellow raincoat looked up at her father. Daddy, did the lady do something bad? The father pulled her gently to his side. I don't know, baby. Imani heard it. And the honesty in that answer hurt more than the rest of the morning combined. Because that, in the end, was the real wound. Not the insult itself. Not the removal. The cloud that was left behind. The small permission given freely to strangers, by a system, to wonder if maybe she had deserved it. Officer Price guided her to a quiet corner just past the gate desk. His voice was softer now. Ma'am, I will be honest with you. Your ticket looked valid to me, back on the aircraft. Imani turned to face him fully. Then tell me, Officer Price, why I am standing here. He looked toward the aircraft. His jaw tensed once. Airline crew has authority before departure. If they tell us a passenger is interfering, we are expected to respond. Even when the passenger has been sitting silently. He did not answer. That silence was an answer. The younger officer shifted his weight from one boot to the other. His name tag read M. Reed. He glanced at Imani, then at the floor, like a man looking at a fire he had quietly hoped not to see again. Ma'am, he said softly. For what it is worth. You handled yourself better than almost anybody would have. Imani gave him a long, tired look. That bar is far too low, Officer Reed. He swallowed. He stared at the carpet. At the gate desk, a Meridian Atlantic supervisor approached. She held a tablet against her chest. Denise Harper. Early 50s. Silver-rimmed glasses. The kind of careful posture that came from 20 years of preventing small problems from turning into paperwork. Ms. Sinclair? We can rebook you on a later flight today at no charge. Imani looked at her. I do not need a later flight, Ms. Harper. I need the documented reason that Meridian Atlantic removed me from a seat I paid for 20 days ago. Denise blinked. I understand that you are upset. No. The word was quiet. It stopped her cold. I am not upset. I am documenting. Denise's face changed. That word, all by itself, had weight. Documenting was not anger. Documenting was preparation. Imani took out her phone. She opened a voice memo. She held it between them at chest level, where the microphone could pick up everything. Please state your full name, your title, and the official reason that Meridian Atlantic removed me from C2A on Flight 1876. Denise's eyes moved sideways. I am not comfortable being recorded, ma'am. That is your right. But this conversation is taking place in a public airport, and I am preserving my account. Denise's lips pressed flat. Beyond the windows, baggage carts crawled slowly under the wing of the aircraft that had just rejected her. The plane sat polished and bright in the morning light, and from this side of the glass, it looked as though nothing ugly had happened inside it at all. Imani lifted the phone to her ear. Maya. I am at the gate. Maya Robinson, 20 years old, Chief of Staff at Apex Crown Capital, was already on the line. She had been watching the in-cabin notification system since the moment Imani had paused her tablet. She had also seen the first video appear online 7 minutes earlier, with a caption that read, Meridian Atlantic just had a black woman dragged off her own first-class seat for a white man who pitched a fit. Imani. Are you all right? I am standing. Send the first message. Maya did not pause. What should it say? Imani looked through the gate windows. She looked at the porthole windows of the aircraft. She thought of C2A. She thought of who was sitting in it now, asking for more ice in his drink. Tell them that Apex Crown Capital is suspending all further funding to Meridian Atlantic Airlines, pending review of the airline's conduct, internal leadership, and civil liability exposure. Maya did not hesitate. Done. Inside the aircraft, Vincent Caldwell's phone lit up. Then Claire's service tablet chimed. Then Denise's gate radio crackled. One by one, the people who had treated Imani as an inconvenience that morning began to understand, in stages, that the woman now standing at the gate was not the problem they had removed. She was the power they had insulted. Vincent looked down at his phone. For the first time that morning, the color drained out of his face. The message was short. Real bad news usually is. Apex Crown Capital has suspended all further funding to Meridian Atlantic Airlines, pending review of leadership conduct and civil liability exposure. Please contact General Counsel immediately. Vincent read it once. Then a second time. His hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles paled. Claire was still standing beside him near the aircraft door. She had seen executives angry before. She had seen pilots lose patience. She had seen passengers threaten lawsuits. But she had never, in 16 years of flying, seen Vincent Caldwell look frightened. What is it? She whispered. He did not answer. Inside the cabin, Robert Hayes had already settled into seat 2A. His shoes were stretched out. His drink rested on the side console. He had the comfortable smile of a man who believed the world had simply corrected an error in his favor. He raised the glass slightly toward Vincent in a small ironic toast. Finally. Can we go now? Vincent did not smile back. His phone began to ring. The screen read William Parker, Chief Executive. Vincent's throat moved once before he answered. William. The voice on the other end was not loud. That was what made it dangerous. Vincent. Tell me why I am looking at an emergency notice from Apex Crown Capital. And tell me why the name on the passenger complaint is Imani Sinclair. Vincent turned away from the cabin. There was a passenger issue, William. The crew handled it. A passenger issue. Involving Imani Sinclair. The name cut through Vincent like a wire pulled tight. Claire heard it. Her fingers loosened around the tablet she was holding. What? She whispered. Vincent ignored her. We are still confirming the passenger's identity. No, Vincent. You are not. I have the file open in front of me. Imani Sinclair. Founder and chair of Apex Crown Capital. 46 years old. Seat 2A on. Flight 1876. The same seat your crew removed her from. 11 minutes ago. Vincent's breathing went shallow. In seat 2A, Robert had noticed a shift in Vincent's face. His smile faded. The cabin, which had begun to settle back into the rhythm of pre-departure, started shifting again. The passengers could not say what they were sensing. But they were sensing it. The way a room feels a draft just before the door blows fully open. Claire stepped backward. Her eyes moved toward the gate windows. She could see Imani through the glass, standing perfectly still, phone in hand, calm. Too calm. William's voice tightened. Vincent. I need you to listen to me very carefully. That woman, the one you removed from first class for Robert Hayes, is the reason this company is not announcing emergency layoffs in 11 days. She controls the $120 million we need to keep our regional fleet flying. What exactly did you do? Vincent closed his eyes for 1 second too long. Through the glass, Imani saw it. She saw the break in his composure. That was the first real crack. Vincent lowered his voice. There was a request to accommodate a long-standing VIP customer. William went silent. For a long, long second. You removed our largest prospective investor from first class. For Robert Hayes. The name Robert Hayes carried a different sound now. It was no longer the name of a loyal customer. It was the name of a stone tied around the airline's neck. Vincent. Get her back on the aircraft. Right now. Vincent glanced at Robert. Robert, who a moment earlier had been a king in his own small kingdom. It is not that simple, William. It is exactly that simple. Move Robert. Apologize to her. Get her on the plane. I will handle the rest from here. Vincent walked into the cabin. Robert. There has been a change. Robert's smile collapsed. Excuse me? You will need to return to your assigned seat. The silence that followed had teeth. Robert laughed once, in disbelief. You cannot be serious. For once in your life, Robert, Vincent said quietly. Read the room. That sentence landed harder than any of the rest. Phones lifted higher. Margaret Ellis exhaled. Through her nose. Paul Ellis closed his book. Claire walked back toward the jet bridge. Each step felt heavier than the last. When she reached the gate, she stopped a few feet away from Imani. Her voice came out small. Ms. Sinclair? We can reseat you in first class. The aircraft is being held. Imani looked at her. Not cruelly. Carefully. No. Claire blinked. Ma'am. We can restore your seat. The entire row if you prefer. Imani glanced past her, through the glass, into the cabin where she had been publicly diminished. You cannot restore what happened. Claire's eyes dropped. Imani's voice was quieter now. But each word landed clean. A seat is easy to give back. Dignity is not. No one spoke. Not Claire. Not Denise. Not the officers. The young man in row 4, still inside the cabin, lowered his phone for the first time and just listened. Imani turned toward the windows again. Below, on the tarmac, Flight 1876 sat brilliant and quiet under the morning sun. Then her phone buzzed once more. She lifted it to her ear. Yes. A different voice this time. Older. Calmer. The voice of a man used to being obeyed. Ms. Sinclair? This is William Parker, Chief Executive of Meridian Atlantic Airlines. The voice on the line was controlled, but everyone standing near her could hear the strain underneath it, The way you can hear the bottom of a deep lake by the way a boat moves above it. Imani held the phone flat in her palm. I am listening, Mr. Parker. First, I want to apologize personally for what happened this morning. Imani looked at Denise. Denise's eyes dropped to the floor. With respect, Mr. Parker. You do not yet know what happened. A silence. He understood the warning inside the sentence. The way only experienced executives understand the difference between a complaint and a warning shot. Then tell me. Imani turned slightly, so she could see both the aircraft and the small crowd that had gathered 20 feet behind her. But she did not lower her voice. I boarded with a valid first-class ticket for seat 2A, paid for 20 days ago. Your flight attendant questioned my right to sit there. Your senior vice president of operations directed her to move me. Your staff threatened to classify my refusal as interference with federal aircraft operations. Security was called. I was removed under pressure, so that another passenger could have the seat he prefers. William breathed out slowly. Through the gate windows, Vincent's phone buzzed twice more. He no longer looked at it. Imani continued. Her voice did not rise. That made it worse. No one asked Robert Hayes to prove he belonged in 2A. No one held his boarding pass up like evidence. No one treated him like a problem waiting to occur. Officer Price looked at the carpet. He had seen all of it. He had also been part of it. That recognition was now sitting in his shoulders in a way that would not lift today, or tomorrow, or for a long time. William spoke carefully. Ms. Sinclair, I understand why you are concerned. Imani's eyes sharpened. No, Mr. Parker. You understand the financial risk. I am asking whether you understand the human one. That sentence landed harder than anger would have. The small crowd at the gate had grown without anyone noticing. Some of them had lowered their phones now. Not because the moment was less important. Because it had become too serious to film like entertainment. Imani's voice slowed. There are people who go through this every day, Mr. Parker. They do not get a phone call from a chief executive. They do not have a general counsel on retainer. They do not control a funding agreement. They simply lose the seat. They lose the dignity. They swallow the insult. And they are told to be grateful they were allowed to travel at all. William said nothing. For once, there was no corporate phrase ready in his throat. Inside the aircraft, Robert had finally stood up. He was red in the neck and ears. This is insane. I did nothing wrong. I was told the seat was available. Margaret Ellis looked at him across the aisle. The kind of look she had used, decades earlier, on parents who came to her office to demand grades their children had not earned. You knew that seat was not yours. Robert turned. Excuse me? Margaret did not blink. You knew. You just thought that wanting it would be enough. Several passengers murmured. Robert glanced around the cabin and discovered, all at once, that the room had quietly changed sides without asking his permission. Vincent stepped closer. Robert. Sit in your assigned seat. Robert pointed through the window at the gate, where Imani was visible. You are humiliating this company over her. Vincent's eyes flickered. That word. Her. Small. Pointed. Ugly. Claire looked like she wanted to dissolve into the carpet. At the gate, Imani heard the faint echo of Robert's voice through the open aircraft door. Her face did not change. But her grip on the phone tightened. William heard it too. What was that? Imani's voice was even. That was your loyal customer. Describing the woman saving your company. As her. Another silence. Then William's voice lost a layer of its corporate polish. I am coming to the airport. No, Imani said. Denise's head snapped up. William stopped. No, Mr. Parker. I will not turn this into a hallway apology. The investor meeting stays at 2 o'clock at your headquarters. Your full board will be present. Your general counsel will be present. Mr. Caldwell will be present. Ms. Bennet will be preserved as a witness, not coached as a scapegoat. Claire flinched at her own name. Denise whispered. Oh my God! Imani continued. What I am asking for, before that meeting. Preserve every piece of footage from this aircraft, and this gate. Preserve every internal message between crew and operations from the last 72 hours. Do not delete anything. Do not edit anything. Do not instruct anyone to revise their statements. If you do, I will know. And I will use it. William answered immediately. Of course. Put it in writing. I will. Within 10 minutes. Inside the aircraft, Robert's voice rose once more. I am not moving to coach because this woman threw a tantrum. Paul Ellis stood. Slowly. Stiff knees. Careful weight. When he spoke, his voice carried. She did not throw a tantrum. You did. The cabin stilled. Paul looked at Robert. Then at Vincent. Then at Claire. My wife and I have flown together for 51 years. We have seen delays. We have seen rude passengers. We have seen mistakes. This was not a mistake. You took a quiet woman with a valid ticket, and you tried to make her look dangerous, because that made it easier to take what already belonged to her. No one clapped. It was not that kind of moment. But every phone in that cabin caught every word. Claire's eyes filled slowly. Not enough to redeem her. Not yet. But enough to show that something inside her had finally found a place to land. At the gate, Officer Price stepped toward Imani. Ms. Sinclair? I need to say something. Imani turned. He swallowed. I should have pushed back on the aircraft before I asked you to step off. Officer Reed, behind him, looked surprised. He had not expected this from his partner. Price kept going. I saw your ticket. I knew it looked valid. I still chose the path of least resistance. Imani studied him. There was no applause, in that moment, for doing late what should have been done early. But there was something in honesty, even when it arrived slowly. That, she said quietly, is how systems survive, Officer Price. Not because every person inside them is cruel. Because too many decent people choose easy. Price nodded once. The words landed in him in a way that would last. Imani's phone buzzed again. An email this time. From William. Litigation hold issued across all departments. Funding review acknowledged in writing. Board has been notified. She read it. Then she looked one last time, through the gate windows. Robert Hayes was being walked, escorted in fact, toward the back of the aircraft. His face was burning. Vincent stood rigid in the aisle. Claire wiped her cheek with the back of her wrist. Margaret and Paul Ellis sat together, calm now, the way two people sit when they have just finished a long, unpleasant conversation. Imani turned to Denise. Where can I get a car? Denise blinked. Ms. Sinclair? We have a corporate driver available. No. I will use my own. The flight, ma'am, will leave without me. Or will not leave at all. That is no longer the most important thing on this airport's schedule. Denise stared at her. Where are you going? Imani lifted her briefcase. To Meridian Atlantic headquarters. But your meeting is not for several hours. Imani looked toward the aircraft one. Final time. The aircraft, which had still not moved. The meeting began. The moment they asked me to move. She turned, and she walked away. The terminal kept moving around her. Roller bags clicked across the polished tile. Announcements echoed from the ceiling. A coffee machine hissed behind a crowded counter. Life kept living in that strange airport way, where one person's worst morning could happen 4 feet from someone buying a muffin. But Imani heard none of the noise as ordinary anymore. Every sound was sharper. Every glance carried weight. She walked toward the exit with Officer Price a few steps behind her and Denise Harper trailing further back, still holding her tablet against her chest as though it could shield her from what she now knew. Officer Reed stayed at the gate. But his eyes followed Imani until she disappeared into the main concourse. Maya called again before Imani reached the escalator. Imani! The car is at arrivals. A black Lincoln. Driver's name is Marcus. Good. James is already on his way to Meridian headquarters. He wants you to say as little as possible until he gets there. Imani almost smiled. James always wants that. He also says the video is moving. Imani slowed beside a tall window that looked out over the runway. How fast? Maya hesitated. Depends what you call fast. Maya. 600,000 views in under an hour. And rising. Imani looked at the parked aircraft. Meridian Atlantic Flight 1876. It had still not moved. Ground crew stood near the nose. The fuel truck idled to the side. From this distance, the airplane looked powerful. Up close, it had looked helpless. That was how institutions always looked, the moment accountability finally arrived to read them their own rules. What are people saying, Maya? Maya's voice softened. They are angry. But not only for you. People are posting their own stories. Being questioned in first class. Being followed in lounges. Being asked to prove tickets that had already been scanned. Being quietly told there had been an upgrade error. Imani closed her eyes. There it was again. Bigger than her. She had always known it would be. Save them, she said. All of them. As many as we can. Names. Dates. Locations. Public posts only. Unless they reach out to us directly. You want to build a pattern. I want to stop pretending the patterns are accidents. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then her voice dropped a register. Your mother called. That sentence cut through Imani in a way no corporate emergency could have. What did she see? Enough. Imani turned away from the window. Is she all right? She asked if you were safe. Then she asked if you were standing tall. For the first time that morning, something in Imani's face almost gave way. She saw Loretta in her mind. 68 years old now. Small, but unbendable. Hands still bent slightly from decades of work. Voice still steady enough to hold a room quiet without ever raising it. The woman who had raised her on discipline, faith, and the stubborn belief that humiliation was never proof of a person's worth. What did you tell her, Maya? That you were. Imani nodded, even though Maya could not see her. Thank you. She rode the escalator down. Outside the arrivals lane, a black Lincoln waited in the morning sun. Marcus, the driver, tall, late 50s, stepped out and opened the rear door. Ms. Sinclair? Yes. He glanced at her, with the kind of recognition that was not from business magazines, but from the same short video that had been circling half of America for the past 40 minutes. He looked, for a brief moment, like a man embarrassed to be recognized himself. I saw what happened, ma'am. Imani paused, one hand on the open car door. My nephew went through something similar, Marcus said quietly, looking at the curb instead of at her face. Not first class. Just a regular seat. Going to his mother's funeral. They said his suit looked suspicious. Patted him down in front of the gate, in front of the line, in front of everyone. Found nothing. Made him miss the flight. He arrived after the service was over. Imani felt a small, slow ache settle in her chest. I'm sorry, Marcus. He nodded, eyes on the curb. He has not flown since. That was the wound Imani wanted Meridian Atlantic to see. Not the public relations risk. Not the investor risk. The damage. The kind that followed people home and stayed long after a corporate statement had been written. The apology matters, Imani said quietly. But what happens after the apology matters more. Marcus looked up at her then. Yes, ma'am. She got into the car. The door closed with the soft, heavy sound of an expensive car closing. As the Lincoln pulled away from the terminal, Denise Harper stood near the sliding doors, watching it go. She had spent 20 years in airline operations, telling herself that difficult choices were just part of the job. Delays. Angry passengers. Crew pressure. Chain of command. But this morning had stripped away every comfortable phrase she had ever leaned on. She had watched a woman with a valid ticket be turned into a threat, because that had been easier than challenging the man above her. Her radio crackled. "Denise. Operations needs a written statement from you." She stared at the runway. For the first time in her career, she did not answer right away. At Meridian Atlantic headquarters, the mood had already turned brittle. William Parker stood in the 34th floor boardroom. His jacket was off. His tie was loosened. The paused video filled the wall screen. Imani's face filled the frame. Calm. Composed. Surrounded. Around the table, executives spoke over each other. "We need a public statement. We need to protect the funding. We need to isolate Caldwell. We need to know who leaked the video." William turned. "No." The room stopped. "We need to know why it happened." No one moved. The words were simple. But they frightened the room more than panic would have. Because asking why meant looking backward. It meant old complaints. Old settlements. Old decisions that had been made quietly, year after year, because the passengers involved had not had the leverage to make them costly. The conference room phone lit up. William pressed the button. "Yes." The receptionist's voice was tense. "Mr. Parker. Ms. Sinclair has arrived." The room went still. William looked at the paused image on the screen. Then at the faces around the table. "Bring her up." He reached for his jacket and put it on slowly. Not for appearance. For judgment. Because everyone in that room understood now that Imani Sinclair was no longer arriving to ask for a seat at the table. She was arriving to decide what kind of table Meridian Atlantic deserved to have. She stepped into the headquarters building, and somehow the lobby grew quieter. The building was all glass and steel. Polished floors. Soft lighting. A long wall of framed aircraft photographs from every decade of the airline's 63-year history. Its first plane. Its first crew. Its first stated promise to connect cities with dignity. That word caught her eye. Dignity. Engraved in capital letters beneath a black and white photograph of smiling passengers boarding a propeller plane in 1962. Imani paused for half a second. Then she walked on. The young receptionist behind the desk stood quickly. She had been warned. Her eyes moved from Imani's face to the phone in front of her and back. "Ms. Sinclair? Mr. Parker is expecting you." Imani nodded. "Thank you." The receptionist exhaled visibly. She had prepared for anger. She had not prepared for the way restraint can make a room feel smaller. Marcus stayed near the entrance. He did not belong in the meeting. But he stayed long enough to see her step into the elevator. There was something healing in that sight. Not triumph. Not yet. Just a woman walking, at full height, into the building that, 3 hours earlier, had tried to make her smaller. The elevator rose in silence. 34 floors. The numbers above the door blinked, one by one, the way a countdown blinks. Imani caught her reflection in the brushed steel of the door. Her suit was still pressed. Her braids were still pulled neatly back. But her eyes looked older than they had at 5 o'clock that morning. She thought of her mother again. She thought of the question Loretta had asked Maya. Was she standing tall? She was. But standing tall could also be exhausting. When the doors opened, William Parker was waiting. 63 years old. Silver hair. Navy suit. No smile. Beside him stood 2 board members, Susan Reeves and Martin Cole. Behind them, down the long glass hallway, Imani could see the conference walls of the boardroom, and behind those walls, the blurred outlines of people who were trying very hard not to stare. "Ms. Sinclair." William extended his hand. Imani looked at it. Then she shook it. Not warmly. Not coldly. Professionally. "Mr. Parker." He held the handshake a moment longer than he needed to, as if hoping to send regret through the skin of his palm. I am sorry that you have had to come here under these circumstances. Imani released his hand. Circumstances, Mr. Parker, are usually created by choices. Susan Reeves glanced down, then back up. Late 50s. Sharp eyes. The careful posture of a woman who had spent decades being the only woman in too many rooms. That is fair, she said quietly. William turned toward the boardroom. Please. The room was long. A walnut table. A panoramic view of distant runways. On the wall screen, the video had been paused at the worst possible frame. Imani standing in the aisle. Claire facing her. Vincent in the background. Robert watching from the side. Imani stopped just inside the doorway. She did not need to look at the image. She had lived inside it. She looked, instead, at the people seated around the table. They glanced at the screen. Then at her. Then away. That was how Shane walked into a room. Not loudly. Sideways. James Miller stood from a seat at the end of the table. General Counsel for Apex Crown Capital. He had arrived only minutes earlier. His legal pad was open. His face was tight, the way it always was when he was preparing to win. Imani. She nodded. James. Maya's face appeared on the wall screen, by video link from New York. Her expression softened when she saw Imani in person. Are you all right? Imani did not answer directly. I am here. That was enough. William motioned to a chair at the head of the table. Please. Sit. Imani remained standing. I would rather begin standing. The executives shifted, just faintly. Vincent Caldwell was already seated, halfway down the table. The arrogance was still in his shoulders. But a thin layer of corporate caution had now settled over it. Claire Bennett sat 2 seats away. She was pale. Her hands were folded so tightly her knuckles looked white. Robert Hayes was not in the room. That was wise. William cleared his throat. Before anything else, I want to say that Meridian Atlantic takes this matter very seriously. Imani looked at him. I hope you understand, Mr. Parker, how little that sentence means to someone, after the damage is already done. William stopped. James wrote something on his pad. Vincent leaned back, jaw set. With respect, Vincent said. The facts are still being gathered. Imani turned her face toward him. The room cooled. Vincent continued, trying to sound measured. There was confusion during boarding. A crew decision was made under time pressure. I regret that it escalated. Imani studied him for one long breath. Then another. Confusion did not remove me from my seat, Mr. Caldwell. Time pressure did not call security. Schedule did not treat Robert Hayes as entitled, and me as suspicious. People did that. Claire closed her eyes. Vincent's face tightened. I never instructed anyone to discriminate. No, Imani said. People like you rarely use the word. You use words like accommodation, comfort, priority, security. You make bias sound operational. No one moved. Beyond the glass walls, an assistant walking past slowed, then hurried on. Susan Reeves leaned forward. Ms. Sinclair? What do you want from this room today? It was the first honest question. Imani looked at her. I want Meridian Atlantic to stop asking how to survive the headline. And start asking who else you have hurt, in the years before I had enough power to make you listen. Claire made a small sound. Almost a breath. Almost a sob. Imani turned to her. Ms. Bennett. Claire looked up. Her eyes were wet now. Imani did not soften her voice. But she did not sharpen it either. Did Mr. Caldwell tell you to verify my credentials more carefully than you verified the other passengers in first class this morning? Claire's lips parted. Vincent spoke immediately. Claire. You do not have to answer that without counsel. Imani did not look away from Claire. That is true. You do not. Claire looked at Vincent. Then at Imani. Then at the frozen image of herself on the wall screen. For the first time, she saw what the rest of the world had been seeing all morning. Not a policy. Not a misunderstanding. A woman in a uniform, using borrowed authority, to make another woman smaller. Her voice shook. He told me a VIP needed that seat. Vincent's chair creaked. Claire kept going. Quieter. He said. If she pushes back. Find a reason. The room went still. Vincent's face hardened. That is not what I said. Claire turned toward him. Tears were running freely now. Yes, Vincent. It is exactly what you said. The sentence was small. It broke something open. William looked at Vincent the way a man looks at a longtime colleague whose face he has suddenly stopped recognizing. Maya's voice came from the screen. James! Did you get that? James did not look up. Every word. Imani finally sat. Slowly. Not because the fight was over. Because the truth had finally entered the room, and now it needed to be made permanent. Claire wiped her face with both hands. Vincent stared at her as if betrayal were a thing she had personally invented. Claire. His voice was low. A warning, without using the word. She shook her head. Small at first. Then stronger. No, she whispered. I am not doing that anymore. William Parker stood at the far end of the table. For years, he had trusted Vincent to handle operational problems before they reached the executive floor. Delays. Crew disputes. Passenger complaints. Quiet settlements. A signature here. A payment there. Problems that disappeared into folders. Those folders were beginning, all at once, to open. James slid his legal pad closer. Ms. Bennett. His voice was calm but firm. You are not being asked to guess. Only to state what you directly heard, and what you directly did. Claire nodded, breathing too fast. Vincent leaned forward. This is improper. She is an employee under significant stress. You cannot treat this as reliable testimony. Imani turned to him. You were comfortable relying on her judgment, Mr. Caldwell. When her judgment removed me from my seat. Vincent's mouth closed. Maya's voice came again. We have another video. Everyone looked up. The frozen image on the screen disappeared, replaced by shaky phone footage filmed from the gate, through the open aircraft doorway. Vincent was visible near the galley. Claire was close to him. His voice was not perfectly clear. It was clear enough. That passenger in 2A. Find a reason. Robert needs the seat. The clip ended. No one breathed for a long second. Susan closed her eyes. Oh my God! Vincent's face turned to stone. That is out of context. Imani looked at the dark screen. No. It is very much in context. William sat down, slowly, as if his knees had finally accepted what his mind had been resisting. Vincent. Did you instruct cabin crew to remove Imani Sinclair from her assigned seat? Vincent lifted his chin. I instructed them to resolve a seating conflict. There was no conflict, Imani said. Until you created one. Vincent looked at her. The mask slipped. Just a little. You think this company can survive by letting outside investors dictate operations? There it was. Not an apology. Not concern. Fear. The raw kind. Imani leaned back in her chair. No, Mr. Caldwell. I think this company cannot survive if its operations depend on humiliating customers who do not match your idea of importance. Vincent gave a short laugh. You want to make this about race because it gives you leverage. Claire flinched. Susan's eyes snapped open. William said, Vincent. But Vincent was past caution now. He looked around the table, searching for allies, and finding fewer than he had expected. We have high-value customers. We make accommodations. That is business. Not every unpleasant customer interaction is discrimination. Imani's voice stayed quiet. You are right. That surprised the room. She continued. Not every unpleasant interaction is discrimination. That is exactly why evidence matters. That is why patterns matter. That is why words matter. That is why who gets believed first matters. She turned to Claire again. Ms. Bennet. When I showed you my boarding pass, did you believe it? Claire stared at the table. Her voice cracked. Yes. Vincent's chair scraped back. Claire. She looked up at him. Trembling. But no longer shrinking. I believed it. I knew it was valid. The confession sat there. Heavy. Unavoidable. Imani did not look victorious. That made it worse. Claire kept talking. Words spilling now because the truth had finally found air. I told myself it was just a seat. That you would get another flight. That Mr. Caldwell knew what he was doing. That I had a job to protect. She looked at Imani. I am so sorry. Imani held her gaze. For a moment, the room waited for forgiveness, the way rooms sometimes wait for another corporate deliverable. Imani did not hand it over. I hear you, she said. Claire nodded slowly, absorbing the pain of that answer. It was not rejection. It was not absolution. It was honest. Honesty was more than she had earned in this moment. James spoke next. Meridian Atlantic has received formal notice. Apex Crown Capital is suspending all remaining funding, pending an independent investigation and structural remedies. William rubbed a hand across his face. What remedies? Imani opened her briefcase. She removed a thin folder. She placed it on the table. She listed her requirements slowly, in prose, without headings or bullets. An independent review of every premium cabin removal complaint filed against Meridian Atlantic over the last 5 years. Preservation of every employee communication related to passenger reassignment. Immediate suspension of Vincent Caldwell, pending full investigation. Written protection for Claire Bennet, and for any other employee who provided honest testimony. Mandatory bias and de-escalation training, designed not by the airline's own marketing department, but by an outside civil rights organization with no history of taking the company's money. Public reporting to the board. And a passenger dignity policy with real, enforceable consequences. Vincent scoffed quietly. Passenger dignity policy. That sounds like public relations. Imani turned to him. No, Mr. Caldwell. Public relations is what companies write, after harm. Dignity is what prevents harm, before it happens. Susan picked up the folder. Her face changed as she read. This is not a demand for money. No, Imani said. William looked at her carefully. Why not? Imani's eyes moved to the window, where one of Meridian Atlantic's own aircraft lifted, slowly, into the pale afternoon sky. Because money is not what was taken. First. The room went quiet again. Imani's voice continued, slower now. When a person is treated, in front of strangers, as though they do not belong in a place they earned, something is taken from them. Not just comfort. Not just time. Their sense of safety in ordinary spaces. Their ability to walk into a room without preparing, in advance, for an insult. Claire began crying again. Silently this time. Imani looked back at the table. If this only ends with an apology to me, then Meridian Atlantic learns nothing. And the next person, the one without my title, gets moved, questioned, threatened, removed. And then offered miles. William looked at Vincent. The decision was already forming in his eyes. Vincent saw it. You are making a mistake, William. William's voice was cold now. No, Vincent. I think we made one this morning. He turned to Susan. Call emergency board council. Effective immediately, Vincent Caldwell is relieved of operational authority, pending investigation. Vincent stood. You cannot do that. Susan did not blink. We just did. Vincent looked at Imani with open hatred now. But Imani watched him with the same level calm she had shown in C2A. He had mistaken her calm for weakness. That had been his first mistake. His second had been believing that power only mattered when it looked like his. Vincent Caldwell did not leave the boardroom quietly. He pushed his chair back so hard that it struck the glass wall behind him. The sound cracked across the room. Claire flinched. William did not. "You are handing this company to her," Vincent said, pointing across the table. "That is what this is." Imani stayed seated. "No, Mr. Caldwell. I am asking this company to stop protecting people like you." Vincent laughed once. There was no humor in it. "People like me built this airline." Susan Reeves closed the folder in front of her. "And people like you made some of our passengers afraid to board it." That landed. For a second, Vincent had nothing. Then his phone began buzzing. One call after another. Reporters. Old board allies. Maybe Robert Hayes. Maybe his lawyer. The old network waking up, beginning, very slowly, to discover that it had been smaller than it had imagined. William turned toward the security manager near the door. "Escort Mr. Caldwell to his office. He may collect personal belongings only. Company devices, phones, laptops, and access cards all remain in this building." Vincent's eyes widened. "You cannot seize my property. Company phone. Company laptop. Company access cards," William said quietly. "You know that policy better than anyone, Vincent. You wrote half of it." Vincent's mouth tightened. For decades, he had used policy like a weapon. Today, policy had turned in his hand. Two corporate security officers stepped forward. Polite. Careful. The kind of careful that gets used around men who are no longer sure they are powerful. Vincent looked at Imani one last time. "You think this makes you righteous?" Imani's voice was low. "No, Mr. Caldwell. It makes you accountable." The officers walked him out. The boardroom door closed behind him. For a long moment, no one moved. The room had changed shape. Vincent was gone. But his presence remained, in the empty chair, in Claire's wet eyes, in William's stiff shoulders, in the paused videos waiting on the screen. James broke the silence. "We need written confirmation of his suspension. Preservation of all records. A third-party investigator retained by end of day." William nodded. "You will have it." Maya's voice came from the monitor. "And Claire Bennett needs protection. Written protection. Not verbal. From retaliation." Claire looked up, startled. She had been preparing herself for blame. Possibly for termination. She had not prepared for the people she had harmed to insist that she not be crushed by the same system that had used her. Imani turned to her. "What you did was wrong, Ms. Bennett." Claire nodded. Tears rose again. "I know. But if you tell the truth, the company cannot be allowed to punish you for exposing the chain of command above you." Claire's lips trembled. "Why would you protect me?" Imani looked tired now. Deeply tired. "Because accountability is not revenge." The words moved through the room slowly. Even William seemed to absorb them. Claire covered her mouth with one hand. She had spent the morning protecting the wrong people. And now the woman she had helped to humiliate was drawing a line, on the table in front of them, that included her humanity, even as it demanded consequences. That was harder to face than anger would have been. A junior attorney slipped into the room. He whispered to Susan. Susan's expression changed. "We have another problem." William looked at her. "What now?" "The video from the gate is national. Every major outlet. And Meridian Atlantic's own statement is already being torn apart." "What statement?" William asked. The attorney swallowed. "Communications sent a holding statement 30 minutes ago. Before legal review." James looked up sharply. "Read it." Susan read from the laptop screen. "Meridian Atlantic Airlines is aware of an incident involving a passenger who was reaccommodated, following standard safety procedures. We take customer concerns seriously and are reviewing the matter." The room went cold. Imani leaned back slowly. Reaccommodated. William closed his eyes. James wrote the word on his pad and underlined it twice. Maya spoke first. That statement just made everything worse. Imani's face stayed calm. But her eyes hardened. Because it repeats the harm. It turns removal into comfort. It turns discrimination into procedure. It turns me, sitting in this room, into a concern. William turned to the attorney. Retract it. Now. Susan raised one hand. Not retract. Replace. With the truth. William looked at Imani. What would you have us say? Imani did not answer immediately. Outside the windows, a Meridian Atlantic jet rose into the sky. It climbed clean. Bright. Steady. Leaving the ground behind. For most passengers, that was all a flight was supposed to be. A way forward. A bridge between where you were and where you needed to be. No one should have to earn dignity at the gate. Imani spoke slowly. Say that a passenger with a valid first-class ticket was wrongly removed from her assigned seat. Say that Meridian Atlantic is preserving all records. Say that an independent investigator has been appointed. Say that Vincent Caldwell has been suspended from operational duties pending review. Say that employees who come forward will be protected. And say that this company is examining whether this incident reflects a wider pattern. William stared at her. That will hurt us. Imani nodded once. The truth often does at first. Susan stood. It will hurt less than another lie. William looked around the room. For years he had measured risk in stock price, press cycles, route disruptions, fuel costs. But now risk had a face. Imani's face. Claire's face. The faces of unseen passengers whose stories were already filling the internet. Send it, William said. The junior attorney hurried out. Claire sat back, still shaking. Imani noticed. You should call someone, Ms. Bennett. Claire blinked. What? Someone who knows you beyond this room. Claire looked down at her hands. My daughter is in college. She will see it. She probably already has. Imani's expression softened, for the first time all day. Then tell her the truth, before the internet does. Claire broke then. Not loudly. Just a quiet collapse inward. Shame had finally found its way past fear. I do not know how to explain that I became this person. Imani's voice slowed. You start by not pretending that you did not. The simplicity of that sentence seemed, somehow, to steady her. William's phone buzzed. He read the screen. The full board is convening in 1 hour. Susan nodded. Good. James closed his folder. Then Apex Crown Capital will attend, as an interested party. William looked at Imani. Will you still meet with us? Imani stood. Yes. Hope flickered across William's face. Imani saw it. She ended it gently, before it could grow too comfortable. But not to finalize funding. The room stilled again. Then why? William asked. Imani picked up her briefcase. To decide whether Meridian Atlantic is worth saving. No one followed her as she walked to the window. Below, far across the runway, Flight 1876 finally pushed back from the gate. Seat 2A was empty. Robert Hayes had been moved. Imani had refused to return. The empty seat looked small from this distance. But everyone in the room understood what it represented now. Not luxury. Not status. A test. And Meridian Atlantic had failed it in front of the world. By late afternoon, the boardroom no longer looked like a place built for control. Coffee cups sat untouched. Legal pads were covered in rushed notes. Phones buzzed without pause. Outside the glass walls, assistants moved quickly and spoke in low voices, the way people move when a company's future has begun to bend. Imani sat at the table now. Not at the head. Not yet. Halfway down. Where she could see everyone clearly. William stood near the screen, reading the updated public statement aloud, one final time. His voice was rough from hours of calls. Meridian Atlantic confirms that a passenger with a valid first-class ticket was wrongly removed from her assigned seat on Flight 1876. We have suspended senior operational authority pending an independent review. We are preserving all records, and we are protecting employees who come forward. We are also examining whether this incident reflects a broader pattern within our company. He stopped. No one corrected a word. Susan looked at Imani. It is the most honest statement this company has issued in years. William lowered the paper. That is not a compliment. No, Susan said. It is a diagnosis. Across the room, Claire sat with a cup of water held in both hands. She had called her daughter. The call had lasted less than 5 minutes. It had not fixed anything. But when she hung up, her face had looked different. Still ashamed. No longer hiding. My daughter asked me one thing, Claire said quietly. The room turned toward her. She asked if I told the truth before I was forced to. Her voice broke on the last word. No one rushed to comfort her. That would have been too easy. But Imani looked at her with a kind of sadness that did not excuse her, and did not discard her. That is where repair begins, Ms. Bennett. Not with being forgiven. With becoming honest enough someday to deserve it. Claire nodded. The tears fell again. This time she did not wipe them away. The full board meeting began at 5. Some directors joined in person. Some appeared on screens from Dallas, Atlanta, Phoenix, New York. Their faces, at first, carried the same expression. Damage control. Containment. Survival. Then James played the videos. The cabin. The gate. Vincent's instruction. Claire's confession. Paul and Margaret Ellis speaking up, when silence would have been easier. The room changed, frame by frame. A director from Texas leaned back and covered his mouth. A former airline executive from Georgia took off his glasses and stared at the table. A younger board member, Danielle Brooks, kept her eyes on Imani the entire time. Not with pity. With recognition. When the final clip ended, William spoke. We need to decide whether this company wants to defend what happened, or change what allowed it. No one answered quickly. Then Danielle spoke. My father stopped flying for 10 years, after being removed from a business class seat that he had paid for. He never sued. He never made a scene. He simply stopped going where he no longer felt safe. Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes shone. That was not a customer service issue. That was a wound. The silence after that was different. It had weight. Susan moved the first formal motion. Vincent Caldwell would remain suspended, pending termination review. An independent civil rights firm would investigate every premium cabin removal, every passenger complaint, every internal reassignment practice from the last 5 years. A board ethics committee would be created. Employee protection would be written into formal policy. Passenger dignity standards would become enforceable. Not slogans. Not posters. Rules. Consequences. Training. Records. Review. William looked at Imani when the vote passed. It is a beginning. Imani nodded once. Only if you treat it like one. Later, as the sun dropped behind the runways, Imani finally stepped out of the boardroom. The hallway was quiet. The whole building seemed to be holding its breath. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. Standing tall is not about never being hurt. It is about not letting the hurt teach you to bow. Imani read it twice. For the first time that day, her shoulders lowered. Not in defeat. In release. She walked to the window at the end of the hall. Below, aircraft lights moved across the darkening tarmac. People were still traveling. Still hoping to arrive somewhere safely. Still trusting. Strangers in uniforms, in badges, in suits, in boardrooms, to see them as human beings first. That was the real responsibility. Not the seat. Not the status. The seeing. Behind her, William approached. Slowly. Ms. Sinclair? She did not turn at first. Yes. Apex Crown Capital still has every right to walk away from this deal. Yes. And will you? Imani watched a small plane lift into the orange evening sky. I do not know yet. William accepted that. Maybe, for the first time all day, he did not try to manage her answer. Imani finally turned to face him. But if we stay, Mr. Parker, it will not be because Meridian Atlantic apologized to me. It will be because Meridian Atlantic proved it can become safer for people who do not have my money. Or my lawyers. Or my title. William nodded. That is fair. No, Imani said gently. It is necessary. The next morning, Meridian Atlantic's news statement ran across every major network in the country. Not everyone believed it. They were right to be cautious. Trust does not return simply because a company says the correct words under pressure. But something had shifted. Passengers began sharing their own stories. Employees began sending documents to attorneys, to journalists, and to Apex Crown Capital's legal team. People who had stayed silent for years found the courage to say, "This happened to me, too." And Imani Sinclair, the woman they had tried to remove from seat 2A, became more than a headline. She became, for a season, a reminder. That dignity is not a luxury upgrade. That respect is not reserved for people who already look powerful. And that justice does not begin only when someone important is harmed. It begins when ordinary people decide, together, that harm should never have been ordinary, in the first place. If this story moved you, support it with a like so more people can hear its message. Subscribe for more stories about courage, accountability, and the quiet power of standing tall. And in the comments below, write these 3 words. Never stay silent.